Hey, today's episode is brought to you by SunsetLakeCBD.com. SunsetLakeCBD.com is not only got a great CBD products, they are a great movement sponsor for this show. They want to remind you that those nurses at St. Vincent's in Worcester are still on strike. 700 out of the 800 are on strike. Tenet, the healthcare, the Dallas-based hospital conglomerate, has now started to supposedly hire scab replacements. These nurses have been on strike now. It's almost their 13th week that they have been out. They need your support. Sunset Lake CBD donated $2,500, and they want to remind you, you can go and help them out, show some solidarity. You can go to, we'll put the link in our podcast and YouTube description, but if you look for bit.ly/ST Vincent Nurses, you can go and donate. But SunsetLakeCBD.com, they are a great company. They are mostly employee owned. $15 minimum wage. They are working outside of Burlington, Vermont. And here's the thing that I just sort of found out recently that I didn't realize. We've all been CBD skeptics in the past. And I was told by, I don't know, just someone I was talking to about the stuff, that a lot of times you can't really trust what's in the CBD products that you get. Sunset Lake CBD. And now I understand. When they would send products, I would get this like booklet almost of third-party independent analysis of their products. And you can find that stuff on their website. They work with the University of Vermont to practice regenerative farming practices, 100% organic and no pesticides. So, and the CBD is legit. It is what you see is what you get. And for me, the tincture has been a great sleep aid for me. Occasionally recreational. I'll have one of the pre-rolls and the fudge. And the weekend brew for me is their coffee infused with CBD. Matt's a big fan of their smalls. He grinds it up with his other smokable products, as it were, now legal in New York.
Yep, the lifter smalls lately, folks.
And they have dog biscuits, which Emma loves to remind me. I tasted, and they're actually not for humans, but
they're
not
for
bad.
Human, yeah,
not bad. They have gummies.
Those are my favorite.
They really fantastic products. You will and the salve, which I use, and they now have a lotion that has CBD.
I have it. I haven't used it yet. But
I'm not a big lotion guy, but the salve is as much as I will get in terms of putting anything on my body.
Sam wants dry skin for years and years and years.
It's true.
Yeah.
It's actually true. But my sister loves it. She's been using it. So check it out, SunsetLakeCBD.com. If you use the coupon code LEFTISBEST, they picked it out. Left is best. One word, you get 20% off. Check it out, SunsetLakeCBD.com. Now on with this show.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
If I get the feeling you've been cheated.
It is Wednesday, June 2nd, 2021. My name is Sam Seder. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Charles Howard Candler, professor of African American Studies at Emory University, of the second Race and Guns in a Fatally Unequal America. Professor Carol Anderson will be here with us today. Also on the program today, a 25-point Democratic win in New Mexico special election pokes a big hole in the anti-carceral reform argument. Joe Biden hands voting protections portfolio to Vice President Harris. Meanwhile, Shelley Moore Capito to visit the White House today as pressure grows on her colleague from West Virginia, Joe Manchin. The largest global meat producer in the world shut down by a cyber attack. Meanwhile, Joe Biden suspends oil and gas leases in Anwar, the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. Speaking of suspending Trump-era policies, Biden officially ends the Remain in Mexico asylum policy. And speaking of Donald Trump, Governor Abbott in Texas yanks the licenses of child care facilities housing immigrants there as a way of creating a crisis for the Biden administration, presumably. New data shows the myth of wealth fleeing high-tax blue states because of taxes. And a new study shows that the lifetime earnings of median male workers from 1967 to 1983 dropped by 10%. One can only imagine what those numbers look like today. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. Glad you could make it today, making it today as well, as she does virtually every other day. Emma Vigeland.
Pretty much.
Pretty much.
Yeah. How are you doing?
Health permitting.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't
you're
mean
going to bring
to-
it up a second day.
Yeah, I don't know why I'm doing that, but I'm just getting used to the fact that it's only Wednesday.
I know.
Or that it's already Wednesday.
And we didn't even tell the audience we used to have a plastic barrier between us. Sam and I now no longer have that barrier, and it is odd. You are clear in front of me,
that's
and
right.
I'm wearing my glasses. It's
That's
like,
right. Yep.
It's like the kind of, when you take the 3D glasses off and you put them on in the movie, see the difference. I feel like I got my 3D glasses on.
It's really raising the intensity of our exchanges, without a doubt. The fact that we don't have the plastic wall here, and we are anticipating over the next couple of weeks the entire crew to come back into studio.
Whoa.
And so big changes afoot here, ladies and gentlemen. With that said, we got a lot to talk about today, so let's get to it. There is several moving pieces that are happening right now in Washington, D.C. that ultimately will decide, I think, the fate of the Biden administration's legislative agenda over the next 60 to 70 days. This week, supposedly, marks the deadline for Republicans' involvement in an infrastructure deal. I got to tell you, I don't think a deal with Republicans is going to look very good. And so I'm going to cop to wanting that not to happen. However, there's a significant kabuki theater that needs to take place where Joe Biden needs to show Joe Manchin that he has done everything to try to do this. This is...
He needs to lay the golden gifts at the throne of King Manchin, right?
Indeed, indeed.
And pull out all the stops so Joe Manchin will be happy.
And what's interesting, though, is today Capito is coming for a meeting. Joe Biden is presumably will do his sort of Joe Biden move where he tells the staff, get out. It's just going to be me and Shelley, and that's it. Yesterday, or Monday, I guess it was, yesterday, in Tulsa, Oklahoma, where he was marking for the first time as a president of the United States, has recognized the Tulsa Massacre that took place 100 years ago, really yesterday and the day before. He didn't say them by name, but it's the first time that we've heard Joe Biden get out there and start to put some pressure, really since Kamala Harris was sent to West Virginia and Arizona early in the Biden administration to give radio interviews about the infrastructure bill. Listen to what Biden said. This came as a little surprise to people.
But today, as for the act of voting itself, I urge voting rights groups in this country to begin to redouble their efforts now to register and educate voters. And in June should be a month of action on Capitol Hill. I hear all the folks on TV saying, why doesn't Biden get this done? Well, because Biden only has a majority of effectively 4 votes in the House and a tie in the Senate, with 2 members of the Senate who vote more with my Republican friends. But we're not giving up. Earlier this year, the House of Representatives passed For the People Act to protect our democracy. The Senate will take it up later this month, and I'm going to fight like heck with every tool at my disposal for its passage.
Every tool.
Well, I mean, first off, let me just say this. I don't actually think it's the case that Sinema and Manchin vote for the Republicans more than they do the Democrats. I actually, just as a matter of fact.
But it's an important rhetorical tool to use in order to get what you want.
It is. I mean, he is singling them out. Everybody knows who he's talking about. They certainly know who he's talking about. And it is. And I wonder. And again, you know, it's very difficult to tell on the outside what they're thinking. Like I said, Kamala Harris was dispatched to do those radio interviews in those 2 states in the run up to the infrastructure bill. She's just been handed this portfolio of...
You mean the stimulus package?
The stimulus bill. Yes, sorry. And she's been handed this portfolio of voting rights. I don't know what there is beyond marshaling these bills through the Senate and the House on a federal level, what you can do from the vice president's office.
Well, people were joking that you give the VP the impossible tasks, like Biden was tasked with cancer when he was vice president. And without the filibuster, my point is just like, he says, I will use every tool at my disposal. Dude, you've got to publicly call to do filibuster reform. That's the number one tool you need. That's what
I think he just did, to be honest with you. I mean,
really?
Well, didn't it? I mean, because he knows that you need 10. And so he's talking to, and he may be saying, look, I know you don't actually vote with them, but you're enabling them. We don't, all we know is that there's a little bit of stick there. He's got the carrot with Shelley Moore Capito showing that I'm willing to reach out. Now, I don't know. This is all speculation.
He's just
on my
talking
part.
about the infrastructure package. There are apparently 10 Democrats who don't want to do filibuster reform behind the scenes, is what these people are telling the Washington Post. So, like, this is narrowly, I think, a stick for the infrastructure deal.
Well, it could very well be reconciliation, but he says it in the context of voting rights. I mean, we don't know. We don't know, but it is definitely a slight change. It may be just a reflection of his frustration. However, I hate to be the guy, the pedantic guy sitting around with Joe Biden, although I'm not sitting around with Joe Biden. I seem to remember him saying specifically, give him 6 months. You'll see these Republicans will come around and they will come help us. And I've got some very bad news for Joe Biden. We are 4 days away from 6 months from when his election was finally certified.
From when his bipartisan potion is supposed to kick in, right?
It could be. I mean, maybe it's 18 days. Maybe it's on his inauguration.
Yeah. It's like the vaccine, right? You don't know when full immunity is going to hit. You don't know when the bipartisan antibodies are going to spread in the Republicans' veins.
That's right. My guess is going to be never. But Joe Biden said 6 months. So we're about at 6 months, and we will see. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll be talking to Carol Anderson, who has written a corrective of the history of the Second Amendment entitled "The Second: Race and Guns in a fatally unequal America. We'll be right back in just a moment. Folks, happy to do this business. I mean, I have used this business for one of our key hires here. Did you know that recent data shows that out of all of the female-owned businesses, it's estimated that 1 in 3 is owned by a mom?
No.
That's going to be difficult. Have you ever wondered how these moms and dads, like myself, find time to hire for their businesses while juggling with their families? How do I hire people? Got to go home, got to cook dinner. Yesterday I had to pick Saul up at skateboarding class.
Yeah, you got baseball.
I got baseball. We'll see if it does the whole rain sold out. Well, it's with ZipRecruiter. Makes it possible. And right now, you can try it for free only at ZipRecruiter.com/majority. CEO and founder Talia Goldstein is one such mompreneur, as I call them. Besides being a mother of 2, her personalized matchmaking company, 3 Day Rule, is constantly growing, and she needs to hire several matchmakers a month. Where do you find matchmakers? Well, apparently you find them on ZipRecruiter. ZipRecruiter's powerful technology helps her find people with the right experience and actively invites them to apply. That's how we got Brendan here. Brendan was just out there floating around. ZipRecruiter sucked him up, pumped them through their system, helped me organize who I was going to interview. He showed up, boom, bango, bingo. I don't know.
It's interesting how you view him as some sort of object to be sucked into a system and then spat out to serve your interest. But
yeah, well, that's it.
Capitalist.
Talia is not the only employer who loves ZipRecruiter. I do too.
Yeah.
4 out of 5 employers who post on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate within the first day. Right now, you can try ZipRecruiter for free at this specific web address, ZipRecruiter.com/majority. Special offer, only good at ZipRecruiter.com/majority. MAJORITY. ZipRecruiter. It is the smartest way to hire. Folks, I never thought I would be someone who thought that socks were important. That like you could actually like socks made a difference. That was until I started getting the hint again with Brendan. I mentioned, have you ever heard of features? And he's like, yes, they're awesome. I wear them for running all the time. And I'm like, I've never even heard anybody say that about their socks.
That they're awesome.
Never.
Right.
And I got to tell you, they're awesome. Features engineers their socks based on the different levels of support and performance that your feet need for different activities. So you take in a casual stroll, you take it with their comfortable everyday crew, like I do. Basically, most of the socks I have. Occasionally, I'll get one of their high-performance support with the Elite, like Golf Max or other ones used for running to pretend like I'm actually doing a high-intensity action with my feet when, in fact, I'm just walking.
Right.
But Features has your feet covered. Features is obsessed with making better performing socks for everything from your daily wear to active wear. You get targeted compression where your feet need it most for better comfort and support. Plus, you prevent your socks from bunching. That doesn't happen to me anymore. They don't slip. They don't slide down into your shoe, regardless of activity. And here's the amazing thing. They are anatomically designed to fit your left and right feet. And they also have like a little L and R on them so you don't get lost. That was for me. I was like, how are you going to, oh, there you go. That makes sense. Premium materials. Every step you take is cool, dry, and comfortable. If you're unsatisfied at any point, they'll even give you a replacement pair, no questions asked. For me, honestly, like it was a revelation. These socks are fantastic. They feel good as soon as you put them on in the morning. Like I don't know how to really express the idea that your feet wake up, but that's what it feels like when you put these socks on. Brendan, chime in.
They're great. I actually wore them this morning, the mid-calf running sock, compression sock, when I ran this morning before the show.
Brendan gives you an endorsement for anything. You know it's real. I mean, he's super uptight about his like workout stuff.
Right.
He's always talking about sneakers. Every product that I get that I like, he is giving me a recommendation on it. Overall details, custom-like fit, durability, peace of mind, knowing they won't slip or bunch. Folks, check them out. Features is so confident that you'll love their socks. They're also offering $10 off your first pair of Features when you go to features.com/majority. If these are not the best socks you have ever worn, on or off the golf course, as you're walking, they will take them back. That's Features, FEETURES.com/majority for $10 off your first pair of Features. Feet as in feet. And lastly, if you've always said you want to read more, the summers is yours for the taking. You could empower your inner reader with Literati book clubs, where you can read alongside the world's most inspiring authors and leaders. I've had great experience with Literati for a book club for Saul. And now they have one for adults. You can join Malala. You can join Stephen Curry, Richard Branson, and more on their next reading adventure. What happens is you're basically in a book club with these people. Authors, leaders, and activists spark lively conversations in 12 different unique book clubs, and Literati delivers their monthly book picks straight to your door. So that means you could talk about Stephen Curry's favorite books with him for reals. You find exclusive interviews with the authors themselves. You won't find any other book club like this. You'd like that, right?
Yeah.
You can follow along with Stephen Curry, and find out what he's reading and what he thinks about the books that you guys are reading together. I mean, you're not reading them together, but you're reading them simultaneously. Well, not
you don't know that we're not reading them together.
All right. Well, okay. All book club members can shop the entire Literati library at discounts with books over 50% off. You can move freely between the clubs, too, if you want, or you use the standard membership to access everything. Choose the books you want delivered. You can reimagine what a book club can be. Redeem your free trial at literati.com/majority report. Head to literati.com/majority report to learn more and read more with Literati. Literati.com/majority report. All right. Want to welcome to the program again, or welcome back to the program, I should say. The Charles Howard Candler Professor of African American Studies at Emory University, author of the second, or I should say her most recent, the second, Race and Guns in a Fatally Unequal America. Professor Carol Anderson, welcome back to the show. I'm here with Emma Vigeland. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
I think I told you this when we spoke about your most, I guess your last book, One Vote, No Vote, One Person, No Vote. That white rage really for me helped me understand the concept of history, particularly in the context of race. But to see the way that race has, I think prior to that, I perceived some of this has returned, but it never, this dynamic has never gone away. This is linear and it continues throughout. And I learned from reading that book, I think it just hit me that history is really more about I'm just going back and reading chapter 1. And now I'm on chapter 15 or wherever it is. And this is all part of the same book, as it were. And you've done that again, I think, here with the second. Give me a sense of what the sort of the, I don't know if it's a myth, but the understanding that we generally have of the Second Amendment in this country.
Our general notion of the Second Amendment is that it was put in place as a way to create a militia that would defend against domestic tyranny, as well as to prevent the invasion from foreign armies, that it was this bulwark to protect American democracy. That's the myth that we have that is really swaddled in the flag and in the founding fathers. And it has this amber waves of grain just coursing through it. That's the notion that we have. That's what makes it this kind of hallowed ground, so that when anybody starts talking about guns, we hit this hallowed ground of the Second Amendment.
And you outline, where's the first moment where you can see in the formation of this country that at least, a significant, I guess, impetus for the Second Amendment was really about making sure that there was no slave uprisings, essentially.
Right, and where that became just, and this is part of why I'm documenting the role of the slave revolts and the statutes that are coming in the wake of those revolts. And those revolts are leading to statutes saying they cannot have arms. So the enslaved cannot have weapons. Also saying that free Blacks cannot have access to weapons. And so you're getting this sense of Black as threat to Americans, to white Americans. And where I saw it just stunningly was in the Virginia ratification debates, where Patrick Henry and George Mason are just going toe to toe with James Madison, because Madison had put federal control of the militia in the Constitution. And what the Virginians saw, and Madison was also a Virginian, but what these anti-federalists saw was that that was going to leave them defenseless against a slave revolt, that they could not trust the federal government to bring in the militia if there was a slave uprising, because that federal government had folks from Pennsylvania and had folks from Massachusetts. And as Patrick Henry says, the North detests slavery. And so that lack of trust said the only way we're going to really sign on to this thing and not push for a new constitutional convention is if we have our rights protected, our rights to control Black people protected.
So what are walk us through the sort of the machinations in terms of the development of the actual Second Amendment from that moment. I mean, so they're mistrustful of the federal government coming in and providing them, resources and military, I guess, to fight a slave uprising. How do they then negotiate that into? How does it develop from there? In terms of mechanics.
And so the mechanics is that there had already been a history of the South playing hardball with the Constitution, playing hardball with the founding of the United States of America. And so this is how we get the 3/5 clause. This is how we get the 20-year extension of the Atlantic slave trade. This is how we get the fugitive slave clause in the Constitution. And the ratification of the Constitution was no easy walk. And there had been this massive push to add a Bill of Rights to it, to curtail the power of the federal government. And there had also been a push to have a new constitutional convention. And what Madison was absolutely afraid of was that this new constitutional convention would grab hold, and that would lead to going back to a kind of Articles of Confederation that had a weak federal government. And he wanted to maintain a strong federal government because the Articles of Confederation were not working. And so it was that threat that was dangled in front of Madison that led Madison to be like a man obsessed. So in that first Congress, he is drafting the Bill of Rights, and he is doing all kinds of Robert's Rules of Order to maneuver this Bill of Rights through Congress so that he can get it passed, so that he can short circuit that quest, that drive to overturn the US Constitution. And part of that was the Second Amendment. And so when you look at our Bill of Rights, we get the right not to have an established state religion, the right to freedom of the press, the right to assembly, the right not to be illegally searched and seized, the right against cruel and unusual punishment. And so you get these incredible rights. And then you think about this outlier, this one about the right to a well-regulated militia necessary for the security of the state, given the right to bear arms. it's like her. That is basically the payoff to the Southern Anti-Federalist, that you can control your militia. That means that you can put down a slave revolt. So sitting in this Bill of Rights, what we have is a right to control Black people.
I guess give me a sense of like how you would, if the idea was that we want to avoid the tyranny of like, I mean, because I feel like, the part of the story that we're told is like, if somehow there's a king that develops, we want the ability so that person doesn't have the monopoly of force. But you're giving it to the state, right? Like you could have that problem within the context of the state. If we were going to write such a thing, we wouldn't have had well-regulated militia, would we have had?
No, and so that language of militia is really key there. Because what we saw with the militia, again, we talked initially about the story that we hear. And so that story during the War of Independence, how the militia took on the king's forces. But the militia's actions were really spotty. They weren't reliable as a force. They could not withstand a professional army. Drove George Washington crazy. He was just apoplectic about it. We also have, right before the Constitutional Convention, Shea's Rebellion. And Shea's Rebellion are when you have white men attacking the government over taxation and the seizure of property for non-payment of taxes. And they are headed toward the Springfield Armory. When it's hard to pull together a militia, they couldn't pull together a militia to take down Shea's Rebellion. And so Boston merchants had to basically finance a mercenary army to quell the uprising of these white men who did not want to pay taxes. And so our narratives about the tyranny of government and our narratives about fending off a king or a foreign army, a foreign invasion, just don't hold water with the historical reality of what was going on at the time. What the militia was good at was putting down slave revolts.
I just want to be clear on that. So the idea is that if you are a contemporary at that time and you are trying to see potential dangers, it would be hard to sort of imagine that you need to provide, as using Shea's Rebellion as the example, that you need to provide for some type of bulwark against a federal army or some type of monopoly of force, because that didn't really exist at that time.
Right. I mean, so there was also this fear of a standing army because that was seen as a force of tyranny. And so what this militia really was about was putting down slave revolts. That's where they had been consistently effective. They weren't consistent in terms of protecting government. They weren't consistent in terms of fending off a foreign invasion. What they could do was put down a slave revolt.
Sorry, but yeah, I just am curious too about how that played into the whole, there were only a few thousand Black soldiers in the Revolutionary War, right? There must have been just this intense anxiety about, or maybe I have the numbers wrong, they seem to vary, about arming slaves or Black people. I know a few states, I think, offered freedom if slaves were to enlist, kind of giving them the tools to potentially revolt, teaching Black people how to use weaponry. That seems to be central to some of the anxiety here.
Yes, and so during this War of Independence, by 1775, you had a ban on having Black people in the Continental Army, a 13-colony ban on having Black people in the Continental Army. But the British are kicking some USDA grade A prime beef butt. And the reality is that the militia cannot withstand it. The reality is that they're not getting enough white men to enlist in the army. And so it gets to the point where they're like, if we're going to win this thing, we are going to have to arm Black people. That's the only way we're going to be able to win this war. And so you see these states like Pennsylvania saying you will get your freedom if you enlist in the Army. So providing manumission for Black men who fight for the Patriots. When the war is headed south, when the British are like, we're getting ready to hit the soft underbelly of the revolt. And so you get the request from Washington, from John Lawrence, who was a son of South Carolina, and Washington's emissary saying, the British are coming. The British are really coming. And we don't have enough white men to fend off an 8,000 force that is coming to just destroy us. You must arm the enslaved. We don't have enough white men. The power is in the vast number of enslaved Black men that you have. And South Carolina flat out refuses, basically saying we are willing to take our chances with the king rather than arm those whom we have enslaved.
How much did South Carolina, were they willing to arm even free Blacks? Or was there even a significant number at that point that it would have made that much of a difference? I mean, they seem to be, and as you go on and you recount the sort of set of statues that sort of begin to proliferate at that time, the idea of arming even free Black men is prohibited.
Yeah, it is absolutely it's terrifying. And that's one of the through lines that I want to just make clear in this book, is that the fear of Black people, the fear of Blackness, the fear of Black people, seeing them as a threat, as a danger, as something to which you have to always keep your guard up and maintain your safety. That was so part and parcel of the decision making that went into the arming of Black people, so that even when they are armed, it's with the proviso that it is at the behest of and under the control of whites. That becomes okay, we can give them weapons, but we control how we give them weapons, and we control what they do with those weapons. So the fear of Black people is central to the Second Amendment and is central to this story.
So let's move forward in history and track some of that. Let's go forward to when we saw the reluctant, I guess, arming of free Black men in terms of our conflicts. We saw it in 1812, and then we see it again in the Civil War. But again, it's pretty reluctant.
Oh, absolutely reluctant. And again, here you have, with the War of 1812, a war with the British again. And so much of that dynamic was the same dynamic that we saw in the War of Independence, where the British were offering the enslaved freedom for taking up arms against the Americans, so you have a race war inside the war, where you have the reluctance of the Americans to arm African Americans. And we see this particularly in New Orleans, where there is a Black militia that is really effective. But that Black militia has been denied access to arms. It has had its leadership removed, and there's been massive pressure from whites to disband this Black militia. But Andrew Jackson comes down and he sees that basically that British Armada coming. And he's like, okay, we need not only that Black militia, but I need a couple of more basically squadrons of Black folks who can fight. That's what I need in order to take on the British. But after the Battle of New Orleans, that they win, that the British lose, you don't see this kind of embrace of Black contributions to American democracy, Black contributions to fighting for this democracy. Instead, what you see is the kind of disarmament and the erasure of African Americans from that war. The same with the Civil War. With the Civil War, initially there was a ban in the Union Army of recruiting, enlisting Black people to fight in this war. it was only a couple of years after the war began, with massive pressure like from Frederick Douglass and massive pressures from the war, where you see the enlistments beginning to open up and you get a segregated army fighting in the Civil War. And again, after that war, the push for disarmament of Black folks was intense because, again, the fear of Black people and the fear of the weapons that they would bring became paramount.
By the time we get into the early 1900s, has the concept of the Second Amendment evolved at all? Because we have in this period, you know, there are a couple of accusations of Black soldiers essentially committing atrocities or firing on white citizenry. Has the Second Amendment evolved in the understanding of it? I mean, if it, you know, how does the myth of the Second Amendment, if it does, change during that era?
The Second Amendment didn't have the kind of primacy then that it has now. So the Second Amendment was really understood as the right to a well-regulated militia, and there had been some discussion about the right to self-defense, but it didn't have that individual right to bear arms component to it. And so we end up in the mid-1930s with a gun control act dealing with submachine guns with the gangsters. And the courts ruled that those kinds of guns and sawed-off shotguns were not part of a well-regulated militia under the Second Amendment. And so civilians did not have the right to those kinds of weapons.
Can you talk about the just deluge of harassment and violence directed towards Black troops specifically? I mean, in 1906, this Brownsville incident in which Roosevelt essentially dishonorably discharged all of these soldiers who were a part of this battalion. Can you talk about that incident? Because I think that's key.
Yes. So in Brownsville, Texas, Black troops were coming in to replace white troops, and the town was outraged, just outraged, having these Black soldiers in their town. And so the harassment was clear. Just the harassment, I don't even know how else to put it, of these Black soldiers, and the barrage of get them out of here. We're going to get rid of them. We're going to get rid of them. And so a white woman yelled rape and said it was somebody in khaki pants. And so that had to be a Black soldier wearing khaki pants. And so then I'm trying to make sure I'm not confusing this with the Houston incident. But in Brownsville, they were put, basically consigned to the camp that they couldn't leave. And what happened was that there was a shooting that night, that somebody had gone into Brownsville shooting up the town, and that a police officer was killed, a horse was killed, and a white man was wounded. And the mayor basically told President Roosevelt, the Black soldiers did this. Get rid of them or the mob will. And so the soldiers, when the shooting was going on, the captain, the officer, called roll call, and all of his men were there while the shooting was going on. And they can't be in two places at the same time, but that didn't matter. What mattered was that whites had accused them of shooting up the town and killing a white man and injuring another white man. And that was all Teddy Roosevelt needed to hear. And so when they interviewed the soldiers were like, we don't know who did it. We don't know who did it. Well, that narrative became that they were yet you had this kind of conspiracy of silence among these Black soldiers, and that they refused to honor the military code and creed. And so therefore, all of them, all 167, would be dishonorably discharged. Now, getting a dishonorable discharge really is like it's like the scarlet letter. It so precludes the opportunities that you have in life. And there was no courts martial. They were just discharged. That sent the signal about how these soldiers were not US soldiers. They were just, as they kept being called, the N-word. That's what they were.
Where were we in terms of the Black codes at this time? These were laws that were essentially passed, pre-Civil War to govern essentially, the movement, the lives of free Black people as well as slaves. But where does that evolve at that? By the time we get into the early 20th century, where are we with those?
And so the Black codes that came really after the Civil War, those are gone, but now we're in the era of Jim Crow. And so we see the rise of Jim Crow in the 1890s as you start seeing the violence really raining down on the Black community to put them back in their place, to make sure that they understand that they are not citizens. And you see the laws really coming up, the massive disfranchisement of Black voters happening at this time. The laws that are providing for separate and frankly unequal facilities in public accommodations, in schools, in virtually in cemeteries, in the Bibles that you swear on for church, in Coca-Cola machines. So this is the rise of Jim Crow and the kind of virulence of anti-Blackness in this moment.
Was there any attempt by Black people to develop their own militias? I mean, as we have this wave of massacres, and really only in the past, it feels like the past 10, 15 years, are we even, recognizing those? The Tulsa Massacre was obviously just recognized really the first time by a president anyways, 100 years later. But we had a series of those through Reconstruction. Was there ever an attempt of Black people to organize some type of militia to defend communities like or something?
African Americans had guns as much as the disarmament was happening. They kept their guns as much as they could because they realized it was the means to self-defense. But what happened with that self-defense is that they could never have enough guns to mount the response that would come in from the state. And so when I talk about Elaine, Arkansas, for instance, so Elaine, Arkansas in 1919, where you have Black sharecroppers who are having their wages stolen from them. Imagine working all year and at the end of the year, you don't get paid. That kind of massive wage theft. And so they begin to organize for a labor union. Well, when wealthy whites get wind of this, that Black people have the audacity to believe they ought to be paid for their labor, that they send a scouting team to hunt down, to surveil the meeting at Hoopsburg Church, where the Black people are meeting to organize for this union. And there's a group of sentries out on the porch because they got a whiff that whites were going to be angry if they knew what Black folks were doing. When the scouting car is there is gunfire that is exchanged. And from that, a white man is killed and another white man is injured. The mob violence that rained down on Black folks in Elaine, Arkansas was only matched by then the governor being able to call in the US Army that brought in machine guns to just mow down. It's like up to 800 Black people killed. So the weapons that Black people had for self-defense were no match against the depth of the violence that the state could bring in retaliation for Black self-defense.
Let's move forward in time because the Black Panthers essentially, I mean, and presumably, I mean, was there any major sort of like, this seems to be the first or you know, the most prominent, I guess, aggressive move by Black people to assert the Second Amendment right, you know, for protection. Basically through the World War I and World War II era, and maybe into the post-war, and then of course they're met with Ronald Reagan. But before you address that response and the Mulford Act, was there anything sort of analogous during that period of 40 years? In between their attempt in Arkansas and in California in the 60s?
Yes, we had Columbia, Tennessee. So in Columbia, Tennessee, there had been an altercation between a Black veteran who was trying to protect his mother from a beating and a white store owner. The veteran, they fell through a plate glass window as the Black veteran is beating on this man. And whites were just stunned. And so this is after World War II. This is 1946. And whites were just stunned that this Black man had the temerity, the audacity to put his hands on a white man. And so whites began organizing and mobilizing to basically do to Columbia, Tennessee, what had happened to Tulsa, to basically a massive pogrom to just eliminate Black folk out of Columbia, Tennessee. Well, these are Black veterans. And so they had their weapons, they knew their military positions, and they took them and they started defending their community from this planned massacre. The response from the state was to go in with the National Guard and round up these folks who were protecting their community from a mass lynching, and to then charge those Black folks with murder. Thurgood Marshall from the NAACP comes down to defend the folks at Columbia, Tennessee. He is almost lynched in the process of trying to defend Black men who were defending their community from a mass lynching. So we have these instances of Black folks defending themselves, and the response from the state is, this is a right you do not have.
And then that becomes, as we move forward, that becomes codified at one point in California. Let's talk about that. And then it becomes operational, I guess, in the era that, you know, in the past 20 some odd years, we have seen that, despite the fact, the loosening of gun laws. But talk about California. So
in California, what you had was massive police violence raining down on the Black community. In Oakland and in LA, just raining down on the Black community, and the police being non-responsive to addressing that violence. And so the Black Panthers for Self-Defense, co-founded by Huey Newton and Bobby Seals, decided that the way to deal with this was to police the police. They knew what the gun laws were in California, and they knew the language of the Second Amendment. And so they carried their weapons openly and kept the legal distance from the police as the police are arresting and interrogating folks in the Black community. Well, the police did not like this. And they went to Don Mulford, an assemblyman out of California, and said, you got to help us. And the response, with the help of the NRA, was to craft the Mulford Act that banned the open carrying of weapons. But it was the open carrying that was the Black Panthers' legal means to police the police. But here you have the sense of, no, we've got to have some real gun control here. We've got to have some real safety here. We can't have these Black folks openly carrying weapons like this. And then we move and those laws were fairly durable until the Supreme Court decided that talk a little bit about how
the Second Amendment then evolves over the course of those 30 years, I guess, into what would have empowered the Black Panthers at that time, right?
So what we saw happening, we had the Gun Control Act of 1968 that was really a ban on the Saturday night specials, these cheap weapons that flooded into the Black community. And then you had the Heller decision. The Heller decision was 2008 in Washington, D.C., where the court ruled that the Second Amendment was actually a right to self-defense, that was a central component of the Second Amendment, and that these gun control laws, in fact, violated the Second Amendment. But DC is a federal bastion. And so the next case was the McDonald case in 2010 that then made it about state laws. And there they went after the laws in Chicago about gun control and said that violates the right to self-defense. And so with that, it made gun control laws legally very difficult. Another component in this was the push that we had from the NRA to mount these stand your ground laws that said, we already had the Castle Doctrine. That's an old, hundreds years old doctrine that if you're in your home and somebody comes into your home that's not supposed to be there, you have the right to defend yourself and to ward off that intruder. What Stand Your Ground does is that it says anywhere that you have a right to be, you have the right to defend yourself. And so it makes the domain a lot larger. And it says, if you perceive a threat, then you have the right to use lethal force. Well, when Black is the default threat in American society, that perception of threat basically puts crosshairs on Black people. And we see that in the way that the law has been operationalized, so that whites are 10 times more likely to be ruled a justifiable homicide when they kill somebody Black than when somebody Black using Stand Your Ground kills somebody white.
And this ends up being also just as, I mean, the same principle operates for police officers in this regard, right? I mean, I have a Black suspect or even just a Black person who has not necessarily been named as a suspect. The approach is, there is more of an existing threat, just generically speaking, just in the moment that I roll up. I don't need to see anything. I don't need any other context. This is, I don't know. If I roll up on a white person, threat level is 1. If I roll up on a Black person, threat level is 7 or something like that. And that, that's their perception, and that goes a long way to justifying their actions, at least with respect to our laws.
Exactly. I mean, so you think about the case of Tamir Rice, the 12-year-old boy playing in a park pavilion by himself with a toy gun. And granted, it didn't have the orange cap on it to say this is a toy gun, but Ohio is an open carry state. And the law says as long as you're not pointing that weapon at someone, you're not a threat. But the police rolled up and within 2 seconds, they shot him. They shot him within 2 seconds. And what they said was, he was a threat. We felt threatened. But you didn't see that same threat level with Kyle Rittenhouse, who was the white teenager who illegally obtained a gun, carried it across state lines, and went to Kenosha, where there was a protest against a Black man being shot in the back by police. And he is welcomed by the police. They were like, we really appreciate that you're here. Want some water? And after Kyle Rittenhouse shoots down 3 men, killing 2 and wounding a 3rd, he walks to police with his hands up as if to surrender, and they ignore him. They didn't see a threat with this white child carrying this rifle. That's the difference.
None of these laws, when we talk about open carry or whatnot, and we could also Philando Castile. I mean, I imagine people remember that instance, but it's hard to come up with a scenario where if you're in a state where you're allowed to carry a gun, how you would have approached being stopped by the police any differently in that context.
Right. I mean, he followed NRA guidelines that say when you are pulled over by the police and you have a licensed weapon, alert the police that you have a licensed weapon, which is what he did when he was asked to show his ID, because he didn't want the cop jumping to see this gun in the glove compartment. And instead, the response from the police officer was to shoot Philando Castile dead.
All right, let's. So where do we go from here? I mean, with a different interpretation and understanding of the Second Amendment, at least, like, where does it? Is it? I mean, how? What do people do with that in the context of a Supreme Court that has decided, no, now is the time that we're going to find an individual right to carry? We are probably, I don't know, months away, weeks away, years away, not many, before it becomes even more explicit with this Supreme Court. What do we do with that information?
And I think part of what we must do is to remove the kind of hallowed ground on which the Second Amendment stands, that kind of veneration that it has. You see these billboards, this is Second Amendment country. Well, what that means is that this is a country that is using the weapons and the law as a means to control Black people's rights. And so we need to understand that the Second Amendment needs to be treated the way we treat the 3/5 clause, that being in the Constitution did not make it venerable. What it was a bribe to the South in order to help form the United States of America. By systematically denying the rights of human beings to their basic rights. When we understand it that way, we're having a very different conversation about gun laws in this nation.
Carol Anderson, the book is The Second, Race and Guns in a Fatally Unequal America. We will put a link to that in our podcast description, our YouTube description. Thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. This was wonderful. Thank you, Emma, as well.
All right, folks, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back in just a moment. Folks, before we go, we talked at the beginning of the show. Do we have that Pete Buttigieg clip? I don't know if we have time for it. But let's play this clip, because this, I think, shows more of the administration sort of like willy-nilly a little bit, carrot and stick, carrot and stick. Here, on the day that Shelley Moore Capito is showing up at the White House, 2 days earlier, the Transportation Secretary, Pete Buttigieg, comes out and says, clock's ticking.
So some Democratic lawmakers who, and I'm not just talking about the Bernie Sanders types who are very skeptical of Republicans to begin with, even though Sanders does have a record of bipartisan work, but some people who make a tradition of it, who normally cut deals, they say, you know what, Buttigieg, you've negotiated enough. The Republican counterproposal isn't much more than the U.S. would have spent anyway. You're wasting your time. Take a listen.
It's an old expression, fish or cut bait. I think we're getting to that moment
We hope to move forward with Republicans, but we're not going to let them saying no stand in our way.
But at some point, we have to move forward.
Casey, Schumer, Durbin, these are people who generally would be in favor of negotiating. Are you basically saying that in the next week, if there isn't an agreement, Democrats are going to go it alone?
I think we are getting pretty close to a Fisher cut bait moment, but I'll tell you that on the fishing side of things, the negotiations have been healthy. There's a lot of conversations going on among members of Congress who have come forward with a lot of different ideas, in addition to the discussions that we've had with the group led by Senator Capito. So we believe in this process, but also very much agree that this can't go on forever. The American people want results. We are 13th place in infrastructure as a country now, and probably headed the wrong direction. We are seeing losses to this day, not just things you count up in industry group reports of the millions that are lost when we have port backups, but just individual families paying hundreds of bucks a year in the so-called pothole tax, the invisible cost of wear and tear in our vehicles when roads aren't in good shape. This can't go on in terms of the condition of our infrastructure. Therefore, the negotiations can't go on forever either.
All right, so there you have it, and so they're putting it out there. This is one of those things where I'll tell you how this worked out in a couple of months. It was either just a complete folly or it was well played.
Well, we pray that it was well played.
Of course. When I guess we'll have a better sense of this in the next week or two when this deadline wraps up. And speaking of deadline, if you're watching us on Peacock, we will see you tomorrow. And if you are not watching us on Peacock, we'll see you today.
Hello.
There you go.
We got a doozy of a Tucker Carlson clip.
Is there? We got some Tucker stuff. I mean, is there a comprehensive list or book of the various massacres that took place from essentially, I guess starting in 1870 to 40 years ago?
I mean, there should be, but even in reading about the Tulsa Massacre, Black Wall Street, as it was colloquially referred to, they tried to, after it was all over, erase newspapers from the archives and literally cut out articles about what happened. And so a lot of the information is incredibly difficult to obtain because literally the government down there was trying to make sure that the archives did not accurately depict what happened.
Yeah, I'm convinced this entire conversation we're having about wokeness is a result of communications technology allowing access to history like this in a way that has never been before. Like, even to hear people from Tulsa talk about, we never really talked about this even. And now, you can't really avoid the history now.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. It's crazy when you look back on the newspapers from that time. It's not crazy, but it's another stark reminder. A lot of the headlines before it became unavoidable were 2 white deaths in race riot in Tulsa. And then they just would completely discount the 300 plus black people who were burned alive, who were murdered in that specific massacre. And there were many, many more on smaller scales that we'll never fully understand the scope of.
Yeah, I'll just say I'm going back and reading the Bismarck Tribune from the first edition in 1873 when it was a weekly. And old newspapers, not very progressive on race, to name other issues.
Is that right?
It's pretty insane.
I'm surprised about that. I would have thought that those papers would have been very, very progressive on race.
Newspapers, the liberal media.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
What's up, Brandon?
Brandon Sutton is here, ladies and gentlemen, to join us in the fun half.
I love summer colors, right? We got to start dressing brightly. Brandon, can you hear us?
I can hear you. Are you referring to my shirt as a summer color?
It pops.
Oh, thank you. I like to, be a center of attention. I like to stand out sometimes.
You like to peacock?
Is that ad or a reference to the pickup artist community?
Just like corporate synergy.
Oh, okay. Not really. I find that like the pickup artist community looks a little bit too much like close magicians, like close-up magicians. And I went through my magician phase when I was a kid. And so, I've grown up out of it.
I mean, we could bring pickup artistry to Peacock.
Well, wait a second. Wait, I want to hear more about the magician phase because I went through that too.
I mean, I think a lot of people go through a magician phase when, you're around that age of like 11 and 10, the idea of magic really took hold. When I was a kid, I feel like magic was coming back, like actual like illusions, not like the, David Blaine, I'm going to encase myself in ice. And so I took like magic classes. I don't know if you can really call them magic classes, but, I took classes in how to be a magician when I was like 10.
I took those classes when I was a little younger and actually was doing birthday parties for young kids.
Oh, well, I never monetized it, Sam. I was not as industrious as you. I just kind of,
Entrepreneur, yes.
Was that kind of just a way to put a little sparkle on your comedy?
Well, I was 7. My comedy was still... I was 7 and 10 and 11. I wasn't. My comedy
was your anti-humor there by age 7?
Yeah, a little bit. I was deconstructing the stuff. That's where Penn and Teller got their idea.
I think that all comedians have a magician phase. They all go through a magician phase, but they just don't succeed, and that's what makes them comedians.
I think that's probably correct. And then after you're not successful as a comedian, you just go into, doing politics on YouTube. Folks, speaking of which, it is your support that makes this show possible. You can become a member at jointhemajorityreport.com. When you do, we magically deliver you a show every single day. Like magic.
It is.
Except, of course, last Monday. But you can become a member at jointhemajorityreport.com. It's your support that makes this show possible. You keep this show chugging along. You allow us to say no to advertisers. You allow us to say no to a lot of different things, actually, and yes to you. So, I don't know. I was trying to make that come home, but it didn't work. Don't forget justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Use the coupon code majority, get 10% off. AM Quickie, you get 7 minutes of headline news every morning. It's there when you wake up. amquickie.com, totally free. One of the things that apparently is driving vaccine hesitancy is that people think they're ultimately going to get billed for it, according to the New York Times. God bless you.
Kaiser Foundation
study.
I don't have any tissues here.
I bring that up as a reminder. The AM Quickie, totally free. The AM Quickie. Also, the Discord, majoritydiscord.com. Check it out. And the app, for that matter. You can get so many free stuff. Majorityapp.com, but we never sell your information. We never do any of that stuff. Brandon, what's going on with the discourse?
Well, we're back to our bi-yearly recording schedule, so we should be picking up and recording. Actually, we have our researcher pouring through pages and pages of Fauci notes right now and pulling out all of the good stuff. So ideally, by the time we record again, we're going to have a lot of, I hate to say revelations, but, revelations about the past year of COVID and COVID-related news that we've been talking about, as well as just a general news update.
All right, there you go. And Matt, what's happening on
Left reckoning?
Well, I was going to say generally the Matt Leckian universe.
Yeah, well, specifically Left Reckoning tomorrow night. Kurt Hackbarth of Jacobin talking about AMLO in Mexico. That's our guest tomorrow night, 8 o'clock Eastern. Left Reckoning. Go subscribe to the YouTube page, folks, which is just zooming past 10,000 subscribers. That's way in the rear view now, so thanks to everybody.
All right, we're going to take a quick break, head into the fun half.
You are in for it.
All right, folks, 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you could imagine.
The alpha males are back. And the alpha males are back, 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 back.
Just want to degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back, back.
I take all of it in my throat.
Alpha males are back, 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 back.
Snowflake says what?
The alpha males are back, 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 back.
You are a madman.
And the alpha males are back, back, back.
I am a total cunt.
Can we bring back DJ Danerky's song, please?
Yeah, or a couple of them. Just put them in rotation.
DJ Danerky.
Well, the problem with those is they're like 45 seconds long, so I don't know if they're enough of a break for people.
That's fucking nonsense.
You see white people doing drugs, they look worse than normal white people, and all white people look disgusting.
And the alpha males,
psych, fuck them, fuck them.
Snowflake says what? Snowflake says what?
A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. Okay, I'm making stupid money. Hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank.
All lives matter.
Have you tried doing an impression on a college campus?
I think that there's no reason why reasonable people across the divide can't all agree with this. Psych.
And the alpha males are back, 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 back. And the Africans are black, 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 black African. And the alpha males are black, 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 black. And the Africans are back, 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 back.
When you see Donald Trump out there, doesn't a little part of you think that America deserves to be taken over by jihadists? Keep it at 100. Can't knock the hustle.
Come on, fuck them, fuck them.
Things I do for the bigger game plan.
By the way, it's my birthday. Happy birthday to me, Jew boy.
I have a thought experiment for you.
And the alpha males are back, back. Africans are black, black. Alpha males are black, black. Africans are back, back.
Come on. Come on. Come on. Someone needs to pay the price for blasphemy around here.
I am a total pussy.
All right. Well, let's do this. We're back. Look at how we were chomping at the bit. We can't even wait till we're back on air to be talking about this stuff. Should we start with Biden? I think this is sort of,
Let's make fun of Biden.
Well, it's not make fun of Biden, but it is a little bit. I mean, I made this point the other day about like a Cialis commercial on some level. Like, I do think that this is this. Well, let's listen to Joe Biden. He's talking in terms of. He made a good point about the Tulsa race massacre, that he's the first president to ever address it. It's been 100 years. But here he is talking about why he perceives there is hope for racial equality in America because it is, I guess, marketers are more open to it. Let's see.
I challenge you, find today, when you turn on the stations, sit on one station for 2 hours, and I don't know how many commercials you'll see. Lay 8 to 5. 2 to 3 out of 5 have mixed race couples in them. That's not by accident. They're selling soap, man. Not a joke. Remember old Pat Goodell used to say, you want to know what's happening in American culture? Watch advertising. Because they want to sell what they have. We have hope.
I mean, there's something to that, I guess, right?
Well, if you're only interested in the appearance of eradicating racism, yes, there's something to that.
Well, no, but I think his point is that if there were a majority of racists who were that racist in this country, the soap wouldn't use mixed race couples to sell soap.
I just think that's an aesthetic argument about racism. I mean, it's the same impulse that causes them to be like, well, okay, Derek Chauvin is going to go to jail. Huzzah. We don't need to really focus on doing a police reform bill because we have these great symbols on our television screens. And Biden feels better about himself personally, even though his policies, decade after decade, were instrumental in ensuring that the soap commercial didn't happen 30 years ago as opposed to now.
That may be true too. And I certainly, I don't think, well, I don't know what he thinks about it being means that we don't have to do anything about this stuff. But I don't know. I mean, Brandon, do you think that, that the fact that, commercial enterprises find it in their best interest to promote a sense of like, I don't know, I don't know if you would call it racial equality, but to promote a sense of like racial integration is a helpful sign or a hopeful sign?
I mean, I think that you can look at it in various ways. The first is, like you said, more people are involved in interracial couples, more people have normalized that it looks like the world around them more. And so they're open to it in a way that is distinct from the past, right? And so, whether it's a cereal commercial or a soap commercial, putting like a mixed race couple in it, sort of in an abstract sense, is a sign that they are changing with the demographics of the country, which is a business decision. You can like sort of dissect the types of interracial couples that exist in these commercials, whether they reinforce typical types of like racism, all that stuff is fine. But then there's also, I think, what Emma is talking about too, that these commercials are used to disguise a lack of progress and also maybe draw upon an already existing political dynamic that's more, turns passive buyers of soap per se into active buyers of, the, let's say, soap brand, because they're, so let's say you don't sell any extra soap besides like maybe 100 more bars, but the people who are buying your soap are more activated. They feel more aligned with your brand. Like they associate more with it. They go from, passive consumers to active consumers. Alternatively, I think where we can no longer rely on this kind of social exposure to facilitate integration is because we're so very siloed. And so we know that the people who are turned off by like the integrated soap brand can go to Fox News and get sold like a racist soap brand or something. And so there's no real need to sort of engage with this soap brand in a way that's anything other than whatever way you want to, right? I mean, going back to 2013, when people were burning Cheerios boxes outside of the Kellogg factory because they had a mixed race couple in an ad, like the first real controversy over that. So but I mean, things have changed since then. Now you can probably buy like, White Pride O's and you don't have to worry about Kellogg. So I think that it's a very good branding opportunity for the soap brand, but it also presents another sort of counter branding opportunity for another soap brand to be more like we're in line with traditional values.
Right. And there is a quality of this too, Emma, just to extend your point that like, people are saying, it's not hard to imagine someone saying, well, there's no racism in this country. We have a black president. And I don't know if you've watched a soap commercial lately, but like half of them are full of like mixed race couples.
And it's still within just like these incredibly, mythologized concepts of capitalism and our system as it is. Like, look at, Obama could succeed in this system. He was a black face in this incredibly, flawed space. And look, there are black faces in a Dove commercial. It actually just validates our existence in the way that we're doing things. And that's the entire way Biden sees the world, is this like validation of the American project, whether it be through his kind of imperialistic instincts or pro-empire instincts, as Jeremy Scahill puts it, or whether it be through vague symbolism when it comes to like, oh, goody, Herbal Essence, has a mixed race couple in the ad. I get that it is a symbol of progress, but it also is so indicative of the passivity with which he treats these kinds of issues. He has no agency, apparently, as the most powerful person ostensibly on the planet to alter these narratives. So.
Absolutely. And just to expand on Emma's point a little bit, we also don't necessarily know about the other business practices of the soap commercials that are making these ads, right? Because it's possible that, with this interracial couple symbolism comes like incredibly exploitative production practices, comes incredibly exploitative, labor practices that would disproportionately impact people of color. And we know that that kind of sleight of hand is a very typical aspect of this kind of, woke washing. That, yeah, we have an interracial couple in the ad, but if you look at our business practices other than that, it's 90-10.
Right. And I would say there is an element of this where it's a little bit self-satisfying for people to feel like they're, I'm okay with the soap brand.
Well, it's like the JP Morgan pride float.
But I will also say,
I don't know.
The flip side of that is I also do think that there are people who are, like you say, 2013, not that long ago, where people are protesting about, like, how could you have like a mixed race couple in a cereal ad? That's disgusting. I mean, there is still, and I contend in terms of, that this came up the other day, E.B. Du Bois, I think white psychology or something. I mean, within the context of that white psychology or that white compensation, I think there is a significant portion of our society that sees that and is like, hey, whoa, what's going on here? I'm losing out. She should be my wife, not that black guy's wife.
No, absolutely. And I think that really, so the problem doesn't really exist with the commercial itself, but what avenues exist for people within our society when they have that, instinctual reaction to exercise it, to contextualize it. Like, do we actually provide people channels when they have that initial, like, whoa, an interracial couple in a soap commercial, like that seems off, to like actually engage with that in any real meaningful way? Or like Emma said, and we've been saying, can they just run to whatever source they want for either coddling or, to drum up the band of rage? Right. I think that, it comes down to, with the symbolism, you can't really weigh like symbolic and material change as though they aren't aren't like put together in people's heads, right? People view like these things as being inextricable from material change, even though in some ways they obscure it. Like they obscure the lack of change within like material conditions of people of color, interracial relationships or not. But that doesn't mean they can be dismissed offhand, because some people are really moved by them, I think. And that might not be something that you can readily measure with like something as simple as like income. But I'm sure with a lot of people, a lot of Black people were actually inspired by Obama's presidency, in a way that is distinct from anything that he actually did, or like, and that's something you have to consider, I suppose.
No, and I don't mean to discount that. It really is just and you're absolutely accurate that the power of symbolism is or not symbolism, or just like progress in that area with Obama's presidency is, I think, monumental in many ways. But what bothers me most about Biden's posture here is just how he acts as if this is tides go in, tides go out.
Oh, like absolutely.
The way society naturally progresses, as opposed to active choices by people in power.
No, absolutely. And I definitely don't want to come across as an Obama apologist, but I think it's mostly a sense of, this is all people have been taught qualifies as change. And so they are willing to map all change in society onto these sort of like little key signifiers. And the problem becomes that we have people in positions of power like Biden, like Obama, that know people think like this. And so it can be manipulated in a way that's a little bit less than disingenuous. This kind of, this enthusiasm that some people feel instinctually for these kinds of symbolic forms of progress because they think it's rooted in material conditions is being just, weaponized against them, mostly.
Let's go to a couple IMs. Rampaging Toaster. I'm on my way back from visiting family in Brooklyn for an extended holiday weekend. I had pizza with gorgonzola, mashed potatoes, and some kind of balsamic reduction. I will never be the same. That sounds pretty good. Mm. David, someone in the IMs yesterday earnestly compared Bernie going on Joe Rogan to Woodrow Wilson screening Birth of a Nation at the White House. I'm begging this kind of leftist, in quotations, to grow the hell up and stop embarrassing the rest of us. Future reactionary, the proof of the pudding is in the eating. This refers to the British pudding, which is stateside, known as sausage. It's impossible to know the quality of the pudding by looking at it, since sometimes these encasings were filled with subpar meats. One must masticate, which for those of you who don't know means chew and eat. Taste and swallow the filling to be sure the pudding was in fact of high quality. Hence, the proof of the pudding is in the eating.
I feel like that's not true. British people call everything pudding. I've seen the Great British Bake Off. Like everything is a pudding if it's like, gross looking enough. No.
Vinny Holiday, hi crew. I know this may be off topic, but do you have any insight as to how the coronavirus has permanently changed work culture and the physical distribution of workers, i.e. tech workers permanently leaving cities like San Francisco because they can work from home indefinitely? I don't think we're going to know until for a while. I think there was trending this way. And I think there was a speeding up of this. And I saw a story the other day that said some people are like basically deciding to quit their jobs rather than go back into office. However, I am also convinced that I don't know if it's going to be in a couple of months or if it's going to be, sooner or later, but some company is going to say, you know what, we're bringing people back 4 or 5 days a week. And we find that it raises our productivity or our sales by 15, 20%. And that's going to force everybody to do that. I don't think it's ever going to go back to what it was pre-pandemic. But I also think that, like, if you had asked me this question in December of 2019 and said, and asked me what the trend would be by December of 2020, I would say less people and more people working remote. That was a trend that was already happening. It's just, it was accelerated, obviously, really dramatically. Anybody else idea on that, Brandon?
I mean, I agree with what you're saying in the sense that, like, we live in a novel time where we're seeing for the first time, maybe in human history, that technological advancements are not being used to make anyone's life better or more, or especially lives of worker better or more efficient or being able to give us back any of our free time. They're being used to, to further enclose us. I mean, I think that when you're talking about earlier technological advancements in like the Industrial Revolution, we see like movements among like child labor being curtailed, the workday being cut back from like 7 days a week to 5 days a week. And now we're seeing like technological advancements just being used to make people more associated with their jobs. And part of that, I think, is just, again, labor, there's not a strong labor, organized labor faction in America to make these arguments that, yeah, like if we have the ability to work remotely, what is the point of this 9 to 5 life? What's the point of 9 to 5 work week anyway, if it's not being mapped onto any kind of real efficiency?
I am a little, I'm going to give you a little pushback on that concept of technology. The first era of technology is not making our lives easier. I mean, I think the trend of technology has been to actually has been, and I guess it depends on when you're dating it. I mean, I think that's true what you were saying about the Industrial Revolution, but, I'm not convinced that the Industrial Revolution itself, that first wave of technology, is what had kids working in the factory 7 days a week and had people working 7 days a week. I think there was a little bit more time off that you had, maybe not so much, in an agricultural life. It was, you weren't on the clock all the time, right? Like you had a little bit more autonomy.
You had the entire winter off to like just maintain shit.
Well, that's true too. I mean, and I'm talking obviously if you were not enslaved, literally enslaved. I'm skeptical about how much technology has provided for our leisure at any rate. I'm a little skeptical about that concept. I've told this story before. I found a steamer trunk when I was back in my yard sale days, 20, 30 years ago. And in the steamer trunk, lifted up the thing and I was rehabbing it to turn around and flip. And I found an article from 1950 of a futurist scientist speaking to the ladies Rotary Club in Florida. And he said, by the year 2000, there will be television beamed to our watches, or a handheld television, which he got right. He got wrong. He said they would be powered by kerosene. And that the real challenge for society would be, what do we do with all our leisure time? Like, how are we going to manage all of the leaders? Because we're only going to have to work like 4 days a week because of the increase in productivity. And it goes the absolute opposite way, right? Like, there's an arms race. And I think that's what's happening. That's what's going to happen when people go back into work. They're going to find, like, wait a second, I get that marginal increase in productivity.
Well, so I agree. I think that we're definitely going to see a wave of articles that are aimed, and we've already seen some of these, that like, what is the cost of work from home culture for productivity? But I think it's important to realize that a lot of these sort of business management style like tips about productivity aren't really based in any real science. Like the idea of like the open concept office as this thing that's going to revolutionize like working together and interpersonal sort of employee like what's I'm looking for, cohesion. It's just not right. It's every study that is shown that open concept office do not do that. They're distracting. They decrease productivity. But I think a lot of this, speaking to the pre-industrial revolution age, is about like the power of either naturalized or moneyed aristocracy to exert control over not only the work life of the employees, but also their private lives, right? You're talking about a move from feudalism to industrialized, sort of concentrated labor in cities and more urbanized environments. And now we're moving more back into techno-feudalism. We're moving into this sort of techno serfdom where we, some of us are going to be allowed to work from home. Some of us are not going to be allowed to work from home. But this sort of integration of work into our lives through like work apps on our phone and like always on sort of DRM style, like VPNs on our laptops is not, I think, is reflective of a move backwards in time, even more so than like, the Industrial Revolution, like we see. But again, I think that's more tied into like sort of decreased power in organized labor than any inherent quality of technology.
I agree with that. And that's why I'm also bringing everybody back into the office. Yep. So, yeah,
I will say I'm glad that you've taken up flipping antiques, Sam, or you've given up. I've been watching a lot of HD television shows, and I can tell you it doesn't ever, work out for the people.
It did. No, it did not. It did not work out that well for me. All right, let's do one more specific reaction to the Tulsa talk, and then we'll move on to the Tucker Carlson segment of our program. This is Lawrence Jones on Fox and Friends. He is the Fox and Friend host, right? Now, is he like, what's happening? What's happening with Fox?
The first off the bench, I would say, at this point.
Is something going on there that we should know about? Like, is Ducey getting squeezed out?
Ducey not committed to hard work. He's taking a.
It feels like there's something good. There's some turmoil there. Like,
but I think you were
Will Kane on there more.
You accurately pointed out that Ducey has been kind of hedging in terms of a lot of the standard Fox talking points.
He's been sort of drifting out of his lane a little bit. But here is Lawrence Jones, one of the Fox and Friends, apparently finding out for the first time that the modern Republican Party had some issues about race.
Oh.
Until we offer the community a choice, Republican leadership in the community to say, look, we stand for equal justice under law. We do care about your kids, but we also care about the police as well. We care about bringing people together. But if you don't offer people a choice, I mean, it was just disgusting seeing Joe Biden being the guy to honor Black Wall Street yesterday when it should have been Republicans leading the way. The people, houses that were torched, the businesses that were burned, those were Republican people. And we should have been out there for the public saying, we stand with you. We want to rebuild it. It's like somebody told the past administration, maybe if you show up to Black Wall Street and say, look, I'm a builder. I'm going to rebuild this community. But they didn't do it. So Joe Biden got the victory yesterday.
1920.
And if you
100 years.
Now, to be fair, I would imagine that those black people in Tulsa in 1920 were Republicans. The Republican Party, changed dramatically in the subsequent 40, 50 years, actually, from that time. And so he was right. And there was a huge opportunity there. And Joe Biden, not necessarily the, at least for most of his career, not exactly the guy out there marching, waving the civil rights flags. But you got to ask yourself, why? Why didn't that last Republican leadership just grab that low-hanging fruit there? You got to ask yourself why at one point. Matt, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say all those opportunities, all these years, they could have just done that, and they didn't say, oh, those are Republicans.
Yeah, it's really weird. I wonder why that didn't happen.
They've been spending most of their time just trying to get people to remember that Martin Luther King Jr. might have been or would have been a Republican today. That's what they got to do, one black person at a time. They got to introduce one black historical figure to the Republican Party at a time. So, they're still working on MLK. Once they move back a little bit, they can, get to the Tulsa Massacre.
And to be fair, super hard to talk about Obama's cell phone slush fund in one breath and then also talk about the Tulsa Massacre in the other.
This just continued obsession with trying to paint Republicans as the people pushing for racial justice because they decide to ignore that the parties switched allegiances some few decades after the Tulsa Massacre is a really frustrating exercise, and they continue to do it every single time they talk about this. They obscure the issue, and there's really obviously no pushback on Fox News. It's such an easily disprovable lie. I mean, it's like saying the Dodgers used to be in Brooklyn. So why is Los Angeles embracing the Dodgers, right? But no, they switched at one point. They were in Brooklyn and now they're in Los Angeles. So it's not like things remained as they were that long ago.
What I find interesting is that Lawrence Jones guy seems really upset. He seems to be genuinely upset and surprised.
It's a performance.
Do you think it's but I don't know why. But he seems to be admonishing the Republican Party, and it's like, dude, are you not aware of what's been going on here?
Is that what he's doing?
Isn't he? I don't know.
I think some people literally believe that, black liberation through capitalism is best achieved through the Republican Party. I have no idea why they would believe that. Maybe because they happen to be in a higher tax bracket than others. I don't know what this Lawrence fellow does. Nice suit jacket. So, maybe something, expensive. And so I think it can make sense. But also, I think it's important to realize that a lot of these performances are not for black people to convince them, but for white people to feel better about their support of the Republican Party and that they're not racist for doing so, because they provide them these opportunities like being on Fox and Friends to explain to them the history of the Tulsa Massacre.
Right. And I guess to a certain extent, his frustration implies that the Republicans just missed an opportunity as opposed to they ran away from that opportunity. Or
I'm sure that there are a lot of black people and women within the Republican Party and gay people within the Republican Party who feel like their mobility within the Republican Party's ranks are entirely curtailed by not only the racism, but the lack of, I would say, the missing of these opportunities to enforce the fact that there is more value in having these kinds of token figures in these positions to say things like this. And so I think there is also just a particularly craven desire for the Republican Party to embrace a level of tokenism that is, alien to the way they raise money from their base, I think.
Well, Lawrence just can't understand that it's because they're racist, dude. That's why they didn't embrace it. We're just talking around the big, anti-black elephant in the room.
Occam's razor.
Yeah.
Not even that they are just racist too, but that even if they're not particularly racist, that's a big part of their brand. It's just maybe Lawrence knows a lot of white Republican upper officials who aren't personally racist, or he feels like they aren't, but that's how they make their money.
Well, that's the point.
He got invited to their cocktail parties, so it must mean that they're not racist.
Exactly.
Racist, but they're selling to racists, and that's the problem. You got to deliver the product.
But they're also racist.
All right, let's talk about somebody who is definitely not racist and definitely not selling racism, and that, of course, is Tucker Carlson, there is a lot to talk about in this clip.
We're going to need to pause it a few times.
Oh,
I'm just anticipating.
Maybe we should just let it play once so that we get the totality and then go through with the pausing.
Okay.
Let's do that. Here's Tucker Carlson.
Actually, you're going to need to pause after about 6 seconds.
All right, let's go.
There's no shot.
If you're a middle-aged American, some of us are, you can probably still dimly remember back to what things used to be like in this country, say 13 or 14 months ago. Way back then, before the revolution, pretty much everybody agreed that segregation was...
Before the revolution, I guess Trump started that revolution.
What revolution is he talking?
COVID.
Oh, okay. All right. Go back to the beginning. I didn't follow. Let's go back to the beginning.
Revolutionary Donald Trump, who's subjugating everybody, I guess.
I appreciate his shot at boomers' memories, though.
Well, he's not a boomer, and neither am I.
And no one in his audience is a boomer either. The average age is 82. I don't know.
If you're a middle-aged American, some of us are, you can probably still dimly remember back to what things used to be like in this country, say 13 or 14 months ago. Way back then, before the revolution, pretty much everybody agreed that segregation was the worst thing this country ever did. Forcing certain categories of citizens into separate, lesser accommodations, barring them from public places, treating them like lepers or untouchables. That was completely immoral and wrong. We were told.
Pause it. I just want to make everybody aware of the rhetorical trick that he's using here. When he says segregation, we all hear racial segregation, but he is divorcing that term segregation. He didn't have a problem with you buy a VIP ticket, you get to go into the VIP area. He doesn't have a problem with the fact that wealthy people, they take first class. Wealthy people, drive in certain types of cars. Wealthy people, he doesn't mind that type of segregation.
The Delta Lounge.
Yeah.
Also, probably not literal segregation either, because I've seen clips of his show. So, so that's a whole nother part of it.
But I just want people to be aware of this, because when he says segregation, we all thought segregation was wrong. This audience, hears racial segregation. But that's not what he's talking about. He's talking about the idea of segregation.
Yeah, and then he says like lepers, oh yeah, that famous instance of American segregation, what we did to the lepers.
Yeah, but actually, hold on. I'm sorry. The lepers is for people who aren't. He's getting into saying, people that are vaccinated and who aren't vaccinated, right? Spoiler alert. If you're not vaccinated and you have COVID, saying you're some sort of leper is it's not analogous to being black. You can't catch a race. This is about a disease, and lepers were contagious with leprosy.
I also want to be clear that if you go back and listen to the way that he's talked about immigrants over the years,
dirty.
We want to keep them out. We want to keep them segregated.
Separate.
There's, that's almost like a competing side dish. But the point is to listen to how he uses segregated. Go back a little bit and let it run a little bit.
Worst thing this country ever did. Forcing certain categories of citizens into separate, lesser accommodations, barring them from public places, treating them like lepers or untouchables. That was completely immoral and wrong. We were told that a lot, and most of it.
I'm sorry. I am sorry. I also remember the story of him coming out and laughing about how he beat up a gay guy in the bathroom once or something. So the point is that he has definitely done this himself from his pedestal here.
I've seen episodes of Tucker Carlson's show where he fearmongers about Roma people moving into Pennsylvania. And so he is all about the oldest types of bigotry that you can possibly even think of. But I do like how he rhetorically, he goes, he shifts the focus. He goes, we were told that segregation is wrong. So now at least he's acknowledging that, well, yeah, we don't think that generally speaking, but the other guys are finally tipping their cards that they think segregation is good, just like us. Why, without ever admitting the segregation that they think is good is racial and gender-based and sexuality-based, and the kind of segregation that he's talking about now, like you said, is sick people from healthy people because they're contagious, quarantining people.
Well,
which again, he was kind of probably in favor of when like the Ebola thing was happening, and it would look like a bunch of African immigrants were going to be the people who were, again, victim of that kind of epidemic. So I think that we're talking about just hypocrisy on so many different dimensional levels.
He also paused before he said worse. I mean, Cody Johnson pointed this out on Twitter, and I was like, you could do, this is a conspiracy. It looked like he was going to say best.
Yeah, go back.
Trolling. I mean, come on.
Yeah, he closes his he's trolling here. He's
go back and go back to that moment.
He's too smart to not be deliberate about this stuff. Yeah.
Pretty much everybody agreed that segregation was the worst thing this country ever did. Forcing certain categories of citizens into separate, lesser accommodations, barring them from public places, treating them like lepers or untouchables, that was completely immoral and wrong. We were told that a lot, and most of us strongly agreed. It was wrong. So imagine our confusion today looking out across the country. The very same people, literally the very same, who just the other day told us that segregation was immoral, are now enforcing segregation. Should we be surprised? Probably not, but we still are. Just this morning, the New York Times informed us that unless you can prove you have taken the injection that the Democratic Party demands you take, you are no longer permitted in bars, comedy clubs, even some dance competitions in the state of New York. You're too dirty to appear in public. You're not welcome near normal people. Want to watch the NBA playoffs in person? You had better be vaccinated to do that. Otherwise, the New York Knicks will bar you from Madison Square Garden. You can still go see a baseball game if you want to, but be warned.
I'm so sorry. Well, James Dolan, infamously a part of the leftist mob, right? The donor to Donald Trump and Mitt Romney and the RNC. Oh, right. He's not beholden to the Democratic Party. He's not, telling people who can come to Knicks games because of some sort of grand plot of segregation. It's because he wants to fill as many seats as possible. And this is a safe way to do it because he wants to make money, which I thought you were in favor of the free market being able to make their own decisions. Bars are making their own choices about who they can have and who they cannot serve.
Libertarians' biggest argument is that it's okay for we should not have the Civil Rights Act because if a business was racist, nobody would go there, and so the idea is that if they're being too harsh in just asking people to be vaccinated when they come in, the market would theoretically take care of it, wouldn't it? But here we go.
Otherwise, the New York Knicks will bar you from Madison Square Garden. You can still go see a baseball game if you want to, but be warned, you will be sitting in your own roped-off section, marinating in your shame with the other disobedient bad people. Medical Jim Crow has come to America. If we still had water fountains, the unvaccinated would have separate ones.
I would hope so.
We don't have water fountains, though, but you know why? Because we have a contagious pathogen going around the country.
This dude also vaccinated, and the idea that he would go unvaccinated and even drink from a water fountain after somebody unvaccinated. It's just, this guy went to Maine and set up and built a whole studio up in Maine and is out there pretending like we should all be angry that there is some protection because everybody doesn't have that opportunity to go up to Maine or back down to Florida or wherever it is at least 3 and counting houses. Is that it? Is that we already have more of him just bemoaning the fact that
water fountains, the unvaccinated would have separate ones. But wait, you ask, is this logical? Does it make sense? Why would people who've had the vaccine fear being near people who haven't had the vaccine? Aren't the vaccinated protected? Isn't that the whole point of getting the shot? Sure, well, maybe from a health perspective, that is technically true if you want to be precise about it, but it's clearly not about health or science. It's bigger than that. It's about good and evil. It's about discovering who is a decent person and who, by contrast, deserves to be punished for sin. It's about finding out who has obeyed. And thankfully, once again, technology is coming to the rescue. Watch.
There can be breakthrough infections. It literally is a medical.
Well, it's not just a question of breakthrough infections as well. It's also like a a function of people basically taking the risks that they're going to associate with it. I mean, there may also be people, I mean, breakthrough infections. You also have, I would imagine on some level, like the idea is that maybe there are people who work there who couldn't get vaccinated.
I think to your point, Sam, that's a great point, the last part, because ultimately, this is just complaining without any real purpose or solution because their framework doesn't allow for anything other than like unchecked pandemic spread or, or like a faux victim complex. Like, so what is he advocating here? Does he want to expand the Americans with Disabilities Act to include, people with conditions that might prevent them from being vaccinated? And like, does he want to expand EEO opportunities and protections? Like, what is his solution here that is actually workable other than like people just being allowed to, go around unchecked in a sort of an unvaccinated state, promoting breakthrough infections, variant mutations, et cetera. Like a lot of this complaining that people give the right wing credit for that even tangentially intersects with like, well, yeah, some people can't get vaccinated. It always fails, I think, to address the fact that they don't have any real solutions within their framework for, I can agree. Maybe we do have a situation where people who can't be vaccinated are going to be turned into second-class citizens by nature of their lack of vaccination status, especially in a country where that stuff is not equally distributed and we have these issues with healthcare. But for him, that's not a problem that can be solved with government or investment in infrastructure or better social cohesion. That's a problem that can only be solved by people like him being allowed to, continue to move freely, unmolested by any sort of standards or accountability. And that's not something that we can agree to, even if there are sort of, points in his position that have a kernel of truth to them. That, yeah, our society is super unfair for people who lack the ability to get, traditional medical assistance or any medical assistance. Like, but he is not interested in solving that problem. So this is just useful. This is just useless complaining and like, brand promotion, which is dangerous in this particular instance because, yeah, people are still unvaccinated in this country. We still have an entire world full of people who need vaccines.
And I would also add that, like, look, we have seen the data now. You have something like vaccination rates for Democrats is something like 82%, and it's somewhere in the 40s for Republicans, I think. And so this is really just masturbatory in many. Maybe masturbatory is not the right word. It is
craven.
No. I'm looking for the word that it's manual. He's just basically jerking off his He's just jerking off his audience. I mean, that's basically it. I'm just stroking them. That's all he's doing.
Or he's just
fluffing the aggrievement.
He's just trying. And the last point I'll make about this is just there's something incredibly disturbing to me about conservatives like him, especially like rabid racist ones, who use, say, MLK as a prop or use Jim Crow as some sort of, I guess, analogy for the aggrievement that they're trying to present. Because, of course, we know if Tucker Carlson was operating in the time that Jim Crow was the law of the land in the South, that he would be in favor of it, of course. But, I mean, now they turn around and use those historical instances that the conservative ideology that he's espousing was integral to upholding, and use them as some sort of kind of moral posturing position so that you can make an anti-vax point and continue to fan these flames, which this is a burgeoning subset on the right.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I'm just biased because I listen to a lot of conspiracy people, but what I find particularly egregious about it, that he clearly doesn't even believe what he's saying. Like, he clearly does not believe that the vaccines are bad. He clearly does not believe that FEMA is going to put people into camps. He clearly does not believe that it keeps anybody safer to be mingling with vaccinated people. He knows enough to like know that this is wrong. When I know people who I listen to podcast people who legit believe that, and they've moved to farms in the middle of Texas and Canada where they live on a compound now, and that's where the only way they can, social distance or not social distance appropriately. Part of this right-wing aggrievement complex is that it's very performative and very public, and it requires everyone to know that you're doing it, burning your Nikes or whatever. And in the situation where there's a pandemic, that's just not as, there are just real mappable consequences for that kind of symbolic rhetoric being detached so thoroughly from reality.
Let's take a quick phone call. Calling from a 210 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Good afternoon, Sam, Emma, and Brandon. It's John from San Antonio.
John from San Antonio. What's going on?
Yeah, nice 25-point win in New Mexico's first district, even though I wasn't happy with Democrats. Didn't hold the primary. The more progressive candidate, Antoinette Cedillo Lopez, lost in a convention chosen by party elites. Melanie Stansberry does support Medicare for all, canceling student debt, student loan debt, federal marijuana legalization, and if Medicare for all ever passes, it's not going to come only from the most progressive members, but from the centrists who got pressure from their constituents, and I think Stansberry fits that mold. So the draconian election bill, SB 7, that was temporarily killed in the Texas House Democrats late Sunday night, the latest voting bills pushed by Republican state legislatures throughout the country have both elements of voter subversion and voter suppression. And while both are terrible, voter subversion gives the power to state legislatures, as in the case of Georgia, where voting laws can be overturned by the state legislature, and in the courts in Texas under SB 7. If voter fraud is suspected, and it doesn't matter if the race is close, it gives the judge the option of voiding an election. While it's extremely important that H.R. 1/S1 in the John Lewis Voting Rights Act get passed, one of the big problems for this country deals with whether state legislatures and governors can actually be impartial arbiters of elections. Here, the relevant text of the Constitution on this subject, which is very brief, says, each state shall appoint in such a manner as the legislature thereof may direct. So in the past months, many poli-sci professors who are experts on election law have pointed this out and have talked about updating the Electoral Count Law of 1887, which addressed the subject of multiple electors from different parties. This scenario happened in the presidential election of 1876. The law is very convoluted, and some say it's unconstitutional. But one of the main provisions is it gives governors the power to certify elections, and this will be a deciding factor that will determine which party gets the state electoral votes. But now many governors could possibly won't accept the results of the election. That seems very suspect also. So there's a safe harbor provision in this law that can be interpreted that Congress must accept votes submitted under the safe harbor unless the elector successfully cast a vote either because of corruption or ineligibility if the vote was not regularly given in the language of the statute. Of course, that didn't happen on January 6th. Pence could have said that according to law, you can only object about corruption and irregularity, and that the Republican objectors were out of order. The electors cannot challenge the election itself, as it can only be done by the state. But the language of the 1887 bill is not clear enough, so a new law can clearly clear that up, and Congress cannot overturn an election of results of an election because the Constitution gives that authority to the state. So I don't know.
All right.
Do you have any comment?
Well, I mean, I'm concerned about the states having, the wide berth here, to be honest with you. And much harder to sort of like develop outrage, right? I mean, if what was going on in Georgia was happening on a national level, there'd be a lot more paying attention to it, I think, or in Texas even. I mean, that was the whole point, right? Why they walked out. But I understand your point. Appreciate it, John.
Right. Okay. Shit. Thank you.
Bye. Grab another call. I'm not sure how many more calls we're going to be able to get to today. Calling from a 249 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Dad.
Say what?
Dad, can you hear me? Dad, it's me, your son.
Oh, hey. Hey, what's up, son?
Hey. Not much. I know, you're talking some black issues today, so I decided to call in. I know you noticed I'm calling from a 249 area code.
Yeah.
Sam, I don't know how to explain this to you, but I married one of your listeners, and I with my car that I got. Remember when I signed with Means TV, things like that, when they bought my show. Drove out to Canada. I live out here now.
Wait, who's this?
And it's Cole James Cash, your son. Sam.
Hey, Cole James Cash. Wow.
You're talking about anti-blackness. Talking about anti-blackness, but here you are denying your black son, Sam.
I'm sorry. I didn't recognize your number. It's you could
I just told you.
Could have called.
I live out here now, Sam.
Did you really get married?
It's been a while, Sam.
Did you really get married?
I married one of your listeners. Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
Awesome.
I married one of your listeners. Yeah. Her name is Lydia. She's at Visitor 6. Jamie know about it. Everybody know about it.
Congratulations.
Yeah, I got married.
Congratulations.
And I've been out here the last 5 months.
Wow.
Thank you. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, I've been out here the last 5 months, and it happened because we DM'd each other like a few years ago. And when I decided, you know what, man, maybe I should I'm getting older. I want to have try again with a family and not cheat,
Yeah.
So I threw my hat in. I said, you know what, let's go all in. She's a member of the First Nations. She from these Canadian streets just like me. And, like me, she's about that action. So it's like, yo, I'm out here in Canada. Been out here for the last 4 months, been hooking up with a lot of folks out here. I don't know if you know one of my closest friends, real life friends, Andre Domis. I know you know him because I know he hollered at you.
I'm just saying.
So yeah, I've been out here.
Do that zip.
I know Andre. Shout out to Andre. Hey Cole.
Oh yeah, and Sam, you know what's crazy?
What
is that? One of my biggest goals in doing this was to reach my people, and in a lot of ways I've done that, but also it was an honor to interview Anna Kasparian a couple months ago, and talk to her about organizing it, and it was just a great conversation. But for the most part, when it comes to a lot of these things and a lot of these podcasters, Sam, I'm a little disappointed, because real recognize real, and I see a lot of unfamiliarity right now. I see some of these podcasters with 500,000 followers, but don't nobody follow them because if they did, they'd be organized and there'd be people on the ground. As you know, Sam, it ain't no secret. Whether it be my man Kenzo, whether it be Jamie, whether it be myself, we out here in the GSA. It ain't no secret what the resumes are. But what kills me is how, I'm not on Twitter no more, and I'm better off for it. But what kills me is that what I see is dunk contests all day, windmills, 360s, but there's no judges. No judges. So, yeah, it's flashy. It looked good, but the fundamentals on how to win, nah. It's just whoever can, do that the quickest and the fastest, and throw that in with a little placating to the right wing, and you got what I see, a little real unfamiliar folks out here.
Yeah.
And my issue, Sam, is I don't know who is really down for this and who's not, but you can't be a socialist if you don't socialize. You can't be a communist if you don't commune. If you're not willing to take territory, block by block, brick by brick, ballot by ballot, jumping on and complaining about a congressman all the way out in New York didn't save me when your local congressman needed some support and signatures on the ground. One particular podcaster got 400-some thousand followers, complaining about what somebody don't do. But how my man Kenzo Shibata, who's in the Chicago Teacher Union, he could get 30 protesters on the ground in an hour with one phone call. It's either your goal is to have more followers and make more money, or you're going to mobilize and get on the ground, knock on some doors.
I mean, look,
because I think a lot of. I'm just tired of that.
I think
Get
look,
out there.
Cole, some people are organizers. I think there's different roles for different people. I mean, I get your point. I think to a certain extent, the Twitter world has become sort of almost a hermetically sealed bubble on some level, where there is no there is no ends outside of like the building audience and just sort of winning within a very, very narrow myopic arena. And I think the point is organizers organize, and that's why they do it better. And they should be, we should be here to sort of help in that job. But I'm not an organizer. I have no skill set in that. My skill set lies here. And so, I try and use the platform to push those things, but I get your point. I mean, I know, I have an idea who you're talking about, or at least, the ilk. But I mean, Sam, can I just say this respectfully? What I'm saying is not just something over the phone. Shout out to my man, Matt Chrisman. When he came to open on the East Bay, like this was something that people saw. Like I hollered at him because I had an issue with the name Chapel Trap House, and I told him, I'm just going to quote myself. I said, Matt, my issue is that it's called Chapel Trap House, but I see a white boy, excuse my language, I don't see no trap niggas on the show. Yet you're benefiting off that. We need to talk about that. And he listened. I hollered at Felix, and there was an understanding, But the fact of the matter is, I started my show because I wanted to talk to people of color. I know some folks, they hear me, they're like, I don't understand, I don't get this guy. But that means I ain't talking to you. There's not a lot of folks like me, unfortunately. I need more Latinos. I need more people of color. I need more folks out there, And so not every message is for you. But at the same time, I get frustrated at, the lack of, it's more than lack of inclusion. It's, the weaponization of the word woke. Cats talking about, media matters is some B words and this and that. And let me just say this, Sam, and I'm just I'll let you do your thing. Whether it be up here where they got a little anti-mask thing going on, I'm hooking up with Kareem Assad next week because, she pulling up. And I'm on crutches right now, but I don't care. I'm going out to tomorrow with my wife. If Chris Sky want to be out there, this and that and the other, cool, No matter what, I just can't help but be out there putting in work. But at the same time, I just get strongly frustrated at the idea that most 14-year-olds, 15-year-olds that I was with in the group home understood the idea of respect is not going to be handed to you. You got to take it. These cats are not going to save you. You're not going to force nobody to do nothing when they have the power not to. You have to organize and give them something to lose and get momentum going and things like that. And you can either report on what you think the left should do, or you should report on what the left is already doing and what cats is out here doing. And, the amount of vitriol I see when, the woke and things like that. Some of these cats, when they're talking about woke or whatever, the idea of inclusion, the idea that you can't call me what I was called when I was 13. So sometimes, society and language moves on. It's the same reason why you can't call me a colored spick no more. But yet nothing's fundamentally changed as far as, the systematic oppression of our people. But at the very least, society sort of moves on and says, you know what? If you're a trans woman and you're down to hold down imperialism, you're down to shoot down a drone, okay, cool. Just as long as you're willing to hold down that status quo, but society does change, things evolve, we want to recruit with that. Inclusion should not draw this ear and this disgust like I be seeing. Yeah, I agree.
Let me tell you something, Sam. In the last couple of years, I made a lot of progress. Made a lot of kids. A lot of friends. I wouldn't be up here without my political connections I made in Canada. But I know how these guys get down, and that's not who they really are. And it's just talk, It's just talk. But here's the problem, I worked at a homeless shelter, right? The one I was at specifically, since I'm up here in Canada, I can say it, Georgia Travis. It was down the street from that VTA shooting. And one of my coworker's husband, who worked with me, is dead. Is dead. So while individuals are out here, these cats got hammers and sickles in their avatars, but when it comes time and push come to shove, and folks of color need their back and need their help, they screaming about woke, and the only thing they picked up was a phone. So it's to me, man, it's like, you can either get out there and get something done, or you can keep running in place. Because these cats out here, they can't beat Dan and wonder why Bison won't look that way. They want to skip straight to the final boss and don't want to put in no work.
Yeah. Well, Cole.
And that's that. But
all right. So
Sam, I'm gonna email you.
Okay.
Hopefully you get back at me.
And it's good to see, good to talk to y'all.
Good to talk to you,
and,
too.
all right, I'm on with y'all.
All right.
Bye.
Bye. It's always good to hear from my son calling in. It's been a while. He doesn't call his dad. Father's Day's coming up, though.
Yeah, well, maybe I'll get you a Harry's razor.
He really is your son, then. I know I don't call my dad either.
There you go. All right, let's get to a couple of clips. Look forward to hearing from you, Cole. Ben Dominic, he's Meghan McCain's husband, right? Isn't he?
Yes, that is correct.
I feel like they really hide that fact when she's on The View that she's related to, or her husband is the head of.
Well, he had a big plagiarism scandal, so she might want to try and avoid that. And now
has she talked about plagiarism with Biden on the show?
I'm not quite sure.
That would be fun.
That would be a weird thing.
Yeah.
Anyway, here is Ben Dominic hypothesizing that we. This is impressive in its complete lack of historical understanding of the Cold War.
The enemy had the bomb. Americans were afraid of a nuclear holocaust. But JFK understood America needed this win. For a president to give such a speech today, every turn would emphasize the needs of a particular constituency, assuring people that the contractor jobs building rockets would be good-paying union jobs, that hiring would be done based on historical equity, not racist math, and that, of course, we'll get all the necessary permissions from the United Nations, the EU, and the WHO about the health and environmental ramifications of rocket fumes. And of course, the speech would be picked apart as sacrificing science on the altar of Cold War political victories. The press would denounce it. Why not spend that money on the ground, on people who need it, instead of some far-fetched vision of putting a man on the moon? They'd call it propaganda instead of idealism. And they'd probably be quoting anonymous sources from inside NASA disputing the president's aim as foolhardy.
First off, talk about a guy who got the job because of his relationships. Man, that is really that's the longest minute I've ever been watching.
What are you talking about? He just oozes charisma. Don't you love how his voice inflection never changes?
First off, the reason why they didn't talk about those being good union jobs was because they were good union jobs. They were union jobs. A. B. One of the driving factors of things like the Voting Rights Act, things like the war on poverty, things like the Civil Rights Act was in fact the Cold War, was the idea that we needed to show to the international community that in fact we actually upheld those aspirations that we articulated about ourselves. That was a big driving force within the context of our politics for that. We were also internationalist at the time. Everything he's saying is completely ahistorical. And in fact, there were people who were saying, why are we spending all this money on going to...
Including JFK himself. There's a JFK tape where he's talking to NASA. He's like, I don't care that much about space. We need to make sure that this is actually providing something for us. So that's a fun tape actually to watch because he gets upset at NASA. He's like, I don't care that much about space.
Well, I mean, Republicans cut NASA funding all the time. Like Trump cut NASA funding, or was going to cut NASA funding in 2019. It's slashed the budget to the lowest it'd been in a while. It's I think it was 0.45% of the national budget. It just so happened that in 2020, the whole Space Force stuff started taking off, and he started pumping more money into NASA. But Republicans are notorious for cutting NASA funding.
Or any research that is just knowledge, pursuit of knowledge. Even research that has a one step removed application gets slammed by them. Are we really studying the mating habits of this near extinct animal? I mean, come on, give me a break. It's, whatever. They love to talk about how great JFK was.
Well.
All right, let's do
They
one.
just like his aesthetics. They have zero interest in the
Totally.
political context of the time.
Well, yeah, they have no interest in the science of it, which is the funny part of it. Like the only science Republicans are interested in are in race science. And so the actual scientific advancements and like the, the patents and sort of like the public good that came out of the space program that is unrelated to getting to Mars or getting to the moon and like winning the Cold War just escapes them. Like, the revolutionary science that included like tinfoil and how that changed people's lives. They don't know anything about that. They just think of like a big sort of like, I hate to say it, dick measuring contest with the USSR. So, in reality, like if they could have like the imperial aspect of NASA without the science stuff, that's what they'd want. And that's what the Space Force is basically for, that continued kind of space imperialism without any of the climate change research.
Exactly. Let's just show up. Let's whip out a new insignia and a nice uniform, and then boom, we're 3/4 of the way there.
NASA's too nerdy. NASA's too nerdy. We got to have something a little bit more military.
A conquering space force.
Not even a new insignia either. It was basically just the Star Trek's logo repurposed.
I know. I mean, I pray that there are not aliens, because like there's going to be a massive push by the Republicans for the Space Force to commit genocide and colonize them.
All right, one more phone call. Calling from a 240 area code. That is, you are the final caller of the day. Who's this?
Hello?
Hello?
Is this me?
Yeah.
Oh, hey, this is Paul. I'm calling from Maryland.
Paul from Maryland. What's on your mind?
Well, guns are on my mind. I think your guest was really interesting, and I called, I hope not to just whine, but it's just one of the things I wish the Dems would drop is the gun issue. It's just such a loser issue, and I don't know, it's one of these cultural issues that we sort of have, like, to pick, if you side with the majority of the other sort of issues that they have. But it's just, it's one of those things. I know a lot of guys and people that vote against gun control, and that's sort of their one issue, but I don't find that the opposite is true.
Yeah, well, they use it for their fundraising apparatus.
I do think that there is, I think to the extent that there are more people who vote on the gun issue who want to maintain an absence of gun legislation. I would agree with that assessment. The reality is, though, is that there's only so much that the Democrats or anybody can do with the Supreme Court as it's constructed right now. And so I personally would like to get rid of the liability protections for gun manufacturers as a way of dealing with this. But I'm not so convinced, frankly, that all those people who are only voting against the Democrats because they believe the mythical idea that Democrats are going to be able to take away their guns would be voting for Democrats in the absence of their rhetoric for that. I find that hard to believe, to be honest with you.
No, I don't mean it that way. I just mean it's another thing they use to sort of hammer, this myth of, these, I don't know what, Biden of all people as the scary communist coming to
right,
take all
but
your
that's
freedom
just an aesthetic, right? If it's not,
like that.
but if it's not,
I agree.
If it's not that, it's going to be something else. So
sorry.
I don't know, Sam. I think there is like this kind of, managerial aspect of it, which people find paternalistic and off-putting. And it literally is just, I really do think it's become this kind of cynical enterprise to talk about so that you get upper class suburban whites to donate to you, and then they keep the train moving along. They have no interest in doing anything about it. So what is this exercise for? I don't think it's
I agree with that. That's much more astutely put than I was trying to say.
I can just jump in quickly. I can see it that way as well, but I also think that has to do more with the kind of messaging that goes behind the Dems, gun control legislation push, and not so much with the validity of it. Because I think it also has the potential to be one of the more radicalizing issues in our political system, because so many people agree, at least vaguely, that we're not doing enough. And it's like you might have a couple people who feel very strongly about the issue, positively or negatively, but generally speaking, polls show that like 80+% of people do think that this is an issue. And the fact that we can't have any momentum on this issue amongst, other issues that have that much broad support, like Social Security expansion, Medicare expansion, stuff like that, is, even if you're not attacking gun control broadly or the way they're saying, is you could bring that in front of the people and say like, hey, you know what, this shows you just how dysfunctional our political system is. 90% of you want X, 90% of you want Y, 90% of you want Z, but we simply can't have it because two people with a lot of money have enough money to afford to make a bunch of ads that essentially change consensus, either broad consensus, or they just pay a bunch of politicians specifically to kill the bill. And so I think that there is just not enough effort put into explaining just how disproportionately anti-democratic our system is, and gun control and the lack thereof is just one of the best examples of that just goes unweaponized appropriately. It's just a fundraising tool. And so people, of course, who are pro it, tend to fall back on this idea that it's just a sign that symbolically I'm more progressive than another person who lives in another state that doesn't have gun laws. But functionally speaking, that doesn't work for preventing any kind of gun violence, from, suicides to mass shootings.
But wait a second. But hold on for a second. Isn't the complaint? Didn't this start off with the complaint is that Democrats are this is politically inept, and so put aside for a moment the reality that there are limitations on what the Democrats can do at this point because of the Supreme Court. Okay, and just put aside the actual things that they can do. The question is it a net benefit for Republicans, for Democrats, to abandon any type of rhetoric about, the gun control, gun safety, whatever? Is it a net benefit? And my argument would be no. I don't
think they can afford to abandon it. I don't think they can afford to abandon it at this point. It's such an issue that's just so forward on so many people's platforms, and it gets brought up, in every campaign. No, they can't afford to just be mum on it or to take a totally no regulation standpoint. I don't have a solution for it. I'm just bringing it up. I'm not.
Well, but that's my point. If they can't abandon it, the reason is because I think it's a net positive. It's net positive for what Brandon said in terms of showing the corruption in the system. It's also, I think, ultimately going to be a net positive if you want to push for any type of Supreme Court reform down the road. And it's a net positive to bring out those suburban voters who aren't necessarily now. I have some issues maybe with the way that Democrats construct their electorate, without doubt. But if that's all it takes to bring them in, as opposed to other policies, then I don't. Look, the bottom line is that it's just not as important of an issue for people who vote for Democrats as it is for people who vote Republican. And there's no value.
I wish it could be.
There's no.
In a way,
That's not going to change. That's just not going to change.
I just mean that, to reduce gun violence and whether it's mass shootings or targeted killings where the parties know each other, if doing something like giving universal health care, which is sure it's a pipe dream at this point at this moment, but and destigmatizing mental health and just doing all you can to erase these communities of despair and these diseases of despair that lead to these things, whether it's like a mass or targeted killing, would I think have, I don't know, maybe I'm full of it, but I think that would have a much better impact on reducing these shootings than changing changing what features are legal on a firearm.
I know what you're saying. Yes.
Regulated from an aesthetic.
I think that's a legitimate. I think that's a legitimate criticism of the legislation that's deployed. But again, it's it's I don't think it's an either or situation. I appreciate the call. But I think from a policy standpoint, if you wanted to diminish the amount of gun deaths in this country, you would work on destigmatizing mental health issues, in addition to also having less guns. I mean, it's super easy to have access to a gun. And for the 30 to 40,000 people a year, generally, in a typical year, kill themselves with a gun, if they didn't have easy access to that gun, more of them would be alive. Period. End of story. Shooting yourself in the head is the most efficient way to commit suicide. And if out of those 40,000 people, 25,000 of them couldn't find easy access to a gun and tried to take pills or whatever it was, several thousand, 5,000, 10,000, 15,000 would be alive. That's just it.
I mean, I don't think that, you can't use structural solutions as a excuse to not tackle like the low-hanging fruit, I think, most of the time. And I think that becomes the kind of like legerdemain that occurs when people, like a specific dangerous thing, whether it be, having guns or having any number of like illicit drugs. Like, yeah, but part of that you're right. We don't have the culture or society that supports people's ability to make good decisions with that. And so we have to work on both ends, right? The idea we can't have all these gun deaths as a result of suicide, but also, it's hard to we can't just abandon the talking point because America is unique in the world in the sense that we have mass shootings every day. Like, that's just nothing, you can't not talk about it. It would be super weird. It would be super egregious. We've already moved towards not talking as much about the smaller mass shootings, but like America is unique in the world in this way. And as part of a leftist strategy, maybe gun violence and the reasons why it's, America is unique in this way, especially as they relate to, like you said, deaths of despair, deaths as a result of lack of access to basic, dignity and material necessities to live are a cause of that, then, maybe gun violence is the entryway into having that conversation. For the Democratic Party, it's not, but maybe for some people, it can be the appropriate thing because people definitely do care about this because it's scary. It's scary to live in a society where like you might be gunned down going to school, or going to, work or whatever. And I know that we do a lot of work in our media to like normalize certain types of mass shootings, but like those are scary too. Like a lot of people catch stray bullets in New York City and in Chicago and places, and they're not as dangerous as the media portrays them to be. And certainly the solution is structural, but like America is unique in that way. It's uniquely frightening in that way.
All right, let's play one more clip. This is really sweet. John Kennedy comes out, not that John Kennedy, the one from Louisiana. And he is announcing his re-election campaign. And you listen to what he wants to do for this country
His
in terms
vision.
of policy. It really is really impressive.
5 years ago, I asked the people of Louisiana to give me a chance to represent them in the United States Senate. Since then, I've gotten up every day, and I have worked as hard as I can to do just that. 5 years ago, I made a promise that I took seriously. I told you I would work to put our country back on track and to make America great again. In the last 5 years, we've accomplished a lot. But now the socialists are racing to undo it all. So my job, our job, isn't finished. Today, I'm announcing that I'm running for re-election for the United States Senate. And with this announcement, I want to make you a new promise.
Nice river.
I promise I will always be your voice during the good times and the bad.
But I'm a socialist.
I promise I will be a voice against the socialism that's now overtaken Washington, D.C. I promise that come hell or high water, your values will be my values. And I will never be silent. Never. When the nut jobs tell me to sit down and shut up. I've made some enemies, both in Washington and Louisiana. You know that. And I guess people can say a lot about me. But the people of Louisiana know this. I keep my promises. And when I say I will do something, I will stick. I can't guarantee you that I'll win every fight, folks. But by God, I will always refuse to be beaten. You can write that down and take it home to Mama. Thank you so much for your support. You will never, ever know how very grateful I am for it every single day. Now I'm asking for your support again next year for my re-election. I will not let you down.
How long is this?
I'd rather drink Weed Killer.
I'd rather drink Weed Killer. I was going to say, I wonder how many people passed away during that, sitting through that. First
I like
off,
how he shot the B-roll at the same diner in the kitchen. Then now talking to people. He only had one, room for
one unit.
Yeah.
I want to say, the makeup and the accent that Tim Heidecker uses in this spot, I think, is brilliant. That is why that guy is the king of comedy when it comes to doing politicians.
Yeah, and the Heidecker bit where you say, oh, for 5 years we've been accomplishing so much, but now we're being overrun by socialists presently. So like, well, what happened? What did you accomplish that we're now being overrun by socialists immediately afterwards?
Like, why, how was it that we were overcome by socialists when things were going so well?
Well, he said, I might not win every fight, but I will stick.
I'd like to rescore that. Like, everything was great for 4 years, but now the socialists are coming for it all. It's like very abrupt mood change.
Also, he's like, I keep my promises. Can you remember what I promised you? It was really basically nothing. So I promise that I get up every morning, and if I break that promise and don't get up, then you can unelect me or just wheel me out.
Why was he using background music from like some sort of life insurance ad that they run or an AARP commercial? I mean, that was the vibe. Soft guitar.
It was like
that's who he was appealing to.
Yeah, it was like go to sleep, I think is the message.
I'll wake up every morning. I promise. I promise.
I may not always stick. I may not be alive.
Unless I die. And if I die, then I promise I'll go to heaven if they let me. I mean, honestly, like, I feel like everybody I know could run for office in Louisiana if that's what it takes.
Hopefully it doesn't. There's there's some... I like how it ends with him drinking Weed Killer, too, right? Like, he kind of buried...
He's trying to be funny. Funny.
Yeah, well...
Here's what I also appreciate. And this came up the other day with Matthew Film Guy. Richard Rodriguez, when he was doing El Mariachi, I think it was. He was working with with a film camera and his recording, and it was out of sync, like every 6 seconds or something. And so he had to cut every 6 seconds to resync things. And people thought that was his style. I'm quite convinced that John Kennedy just can't read a teleprompter so good.
Also, did that ad need to be too... Oh.
He takes his time.
Okay. Thought you were done.
In between delivering lines.
Yeah, not the normal energy you bring to commercials, where you're trying to get as much information in as few seconds as possible.
Yeah, that was a pretty palliative ad, I would say.
They elongated it, and it felt like the cross dissolved lasts like 30 seconds.
This is the last thing you're going to see before they euthanize you. So just go to sleep, and you'll never wake up again.
It's the Get Out.
I've given you all Weed Killer. That's what I've done. And I promise I'll give you more if you're not dead yet. That's basically it. All right, let's do some IMs and get the heck out of here. So soothing, that commercial. Brandon didn't feel comfortable talking about it because he was on the production team that did that spot.
No, I had to run to the bathroom, but I will say I like the part where he said that he's a winner and winners don't lose. And so like that was, that spoke to me as another winner. So I can see why people vote for him.
There you go. Epineva, that's what I tune in for. Emma's super current references to everyone's favorite HBO program, Game of Thrones. Jersey Max, what are everyone's thoughts on Social Security? My coworker keeps telling me that it will run out by the time I retire, but I hear that every year for the last 25 years. Yes, you do. The trust fund, if there is no attempt to shore up the trust fund will run out of money somewhere around 2031. However, if nothing is done, it will pay out at least 82% of due payments until you die. That is just a fact. You got to get them to understand that the trust fund is not the same. People are still paying into Social Security. I actually think my guess would be that next year when the Social Security trustees issue their report, they're going to bump it up to 2032, 2033, just because of revenue that we're going to see come in. But it's also, they can just change taxes. Super easy fix. My Pillow, looks like Trump just deleted his blog today and put out this new attack ad on Joe Biden and other Democrats. His blog went under Big Dick Cheney energy. My idiotic coworkers now openly saying they don't believe the Tulsa Massacre happened.
Okay.
They believe it was made out of whole cloth just for the HBO Watchmen show to make white people look bad.
I was going to say, I feel like that's how it got into the consciousness, basically.
Definitely.
Was that a good show, by the way?
It was pretty good, actually.
Yeah.
Be like Mike. People are mad about Jake from State Farm being black. Robo Gorka. Pac-Man plays Is It a Sandwich Game? Brandon, you should start playing Is It a Pudding Game? Username. Thanks for Cole's call. That's my issue with some left people on YouTube, etc. Very concerned with how wokeness isolates the left, might turn people off. The need to build solidarity. Okay, what about the primacy of solidarity with those on the receiving end of cancelable comments rather than the offenders? Exactly. Matthew from Indianapolis. It's weird that I can always recognize it's John from San Antonio before he speaks because of the little click his landline phone makes when he picks it up from its dock. I don't know.
Wow.
Jay Tingle, Robert Rodriguez, not Richard Rodriguez, directed El Mariachi. Thank you for that correction. Hack. Sam, I can't take any more. The junior senator from West Virginia, Shelley Moore Capetto. Okay, thank you. Capito. I get somebody who named Ferret who emails us with the time date stamp every time I mispronounce Nomiki's name.
Oh, someone named Ferret?
Yep.
Sounds like...
On email. Oh, shoot. Okay, yeah, we got to go. All right, well, one more IM, then we're out of here. Brandon is at the bathroom. Good job today, Brandon. Good job, Matt. Good job, Brandon. Good job, Emma. Final IM of the day. JK, a dude hit on teenage Tucker at a Georgetown Park Mall bathroom. Tucker knocked him out of the way as he ran outside because Tucker isn't gay. There you go. Folks, see you. Oh, tomorrow we're not live. We do have a show. You do not want to miss this. Dorothy Brown, really fascinating work she's done on the tax code that shows, you want to know an argument about systemic racism still existing? Tune in tomorrow to Dorothy Brown. We'll have a little bit of new stuff, but there'll be no fun half tomorrow. We're taking a tech day. We will see you then.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the light bar, but finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. I get somewhere the choice was made, for the option where you don't get paid, for the road that bends before it finally breaks.